Darius Coleman had walked this route 100 times before, broom in hand, boots splashing through midnight puddles as the city slept. But tonight, under a flickering street lamp on the edge of Baltimore Heights, something made him stop. A young woman stood at the corner, soaked to the skin, staring into the dark like it might swallow her whole. Darius paused, careful not to startle her. "You shouldn't be out here," he said. "This street isn't kind after midnight." She flinched. "I don't need charity," she muttered, pride cracking in her voice. Darius didn't argue. He just nodded toward the row of buildings behind him. "Wasn't offering. Just saying my place is 2 blocks that way. Got a working heater, clean couch, and a lock on the door." She hesitated, her breath hitching. He could see the way she glanced over her shoulder, not at him, but at something she'd clearly left behind. "You can follow or stay," he added, already turning. "Up to you." He didn't look back, not even when he heard her footsteps finally start behind him, slow at first, then quicker, like she was trying not to change her mind. By the time they reached his place, neither had spoken. Inside, he pointed to a faded welcome mat. "Shoes off. The little one's a light sleeper." She didn't ask who he meant. She just followed his lead, dripping rainwater on the tile floor, clutching her arms tighter around her chest. Darius handed her a towel, a hoodie that once belonged to someone he didn't talk about, and nodded toward the bathroom. Hot water takes a minute, but it gets there. When she finally emerged, dry but still tense, he had already left a cup of microwave tea and a folded blanket on the couch. No questions, no pressure. Just a note. "If you need anything, I'm down the hall. Try to rest." She stood in the quiet living room for a long moment, reading the words again and again, like they didn't make sense. No one had offered her comfort without cost in a long time. Maybe never. She sank into the couch like it might disappear if she moved too fast. Outside, the rain softened against the window. For the first time in days, her breath came easier. If this moment touched you, drop a comment below with the city you're watching from. Hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like that. Darius didn't sleep much that night. His room was barely separated from the living area by a thin wall and an old door that didn't quite close right. He lay in bed with one ear tuned to the soft creaks of the couch springs and the occasional rustle of a blanket being adjusted. Nia snored lightly beside him, curled into a ball under her rainbow sheets, her tiny hand resting against his shoulder like she always did. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about the girl now occupying his living room. Someone he'd never seen before, whose name he didn't know, but who had looked at him with more fear than trust when he'd offered her warmth. It wasn't the first time he'd helped a stranger, but this was the first time he'd done it while his daughter slept down the hall. By sunrise, Darius was already up, moving through the kitchen with practiced quiet, pulling together the usual: eggs, toast, instant coffee. He didn't expect her to still be there. Part of him figured she'd slip out during the night, but when he stepped into the living room, she was curled up on the couch exactly as he'd left her, the blanket twisted around her legs, the hoodie pulled tight over her face, only the tips of her fingers peeking out from the sleeves. He didn't say anything. Just walked past and left a second mug of coffee on the table beside hers. It wasn't until the sound of Nia's sleepy footsteps padded down the hall that the girl stirred. She blinked in the soft morning light, confusion clouding her features until her eyes landed on the little girl now standing a few feet away, clutching a stuffed giraffe and staring with wide-eyed curiosity. "Hi," Nia said brightly, breaking the silence like it was no big deal. "Are you a princess?" The girl sat up slowly, blinking. "Excuse me?" "You look like one," Nia added. "Daddy says only special people get to stay over." The girl blinked again and then, unexpectedly, smiled. Darius appeared behind them, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Morning," he said, his voice neutral, giving the girl space to find her footing. She cleared her throat. "Morning." He handed her a plate of eggs and toast without fanfare and gestured toward the table. Eat. You'll need it. She didn't argue this time, just nodded and followed his lead, sitting stiffly across from him as Nia climbed onto her booster seat between them. The silence wasn't awkward, it was tentative, like all three of them were trying to figure out the shape of this strange triangle they'd stumbled into. Halfway through the meal, Nia spilled her orange juice across the table. Darius moved quickly, mopping it up with a towel before it could reach anyone's lap. The girl flinched, like she expected to be yelled at. But there was no tension in his shoulders, no flash of frustration. Just calm efficiency. Happens every morning, he muttered. If the juice doesn't fall, the toast burns. We're consistent like that. She watched him closely, the way he ruffled Nia's curls without thinking, the way his hands moved automatically toward service without complaint. It was the first time she noticed how different this home felt. There was no performance here, just rhythm. Later, when she returned from brushing her teeth with a borrowed toothbrush, she found the couch neatly remade and a fresh towel hanging on the rack in the bathroom, folded the way hotels did, with the edges tucked just so. It struck her as oddly gentle. Not because it was extravagant, but because someone had cared enough to think about what would make a stranger comfortable. She paused in the hallway, one hand on the doorframe, listening to the hum of the kitchen as Darius washed dishes and Nia chattered about school. She stepped in slowly, offering to dry. Darius didn't answer immediately, just passed her a towel and kept scrubbing. They worked in companionable quiet, water dripping from her fingers, steam curling up from the sink. Finally, she spoke. "I'm Sloane," she said quietly, "in case you were wondering." Darius looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "Didn't ask," he replied. But there was no edge in his voice, just a simple truth. She smiled faintly. "Still, you should know." He nodded once. "Darius." That was all. When the dishes were done, he handed her the last clean coffee mug, still damp, and said, "You're safe here." Just that. No questions, no lectures. And for reasons she couldn't explain, it was the first time in years that those words actually meant something. The next morning, the house woke gently, not with alarms or shouting, but with the soft clatter of a skillet and the scent of something warm in the air. Sloane stirred on the couch, her body sore but not aching, her mind sluggish as she blinked into the golden light filtering through the curtains. For a brief second, she forgot where she was. And then she heard Nia's giggle from the kitchen, followed by a low male voice and the unmistakable sizzle of breakfast being made from scratch. It was the kind of soundscape she'd only seen in movies, homes where mornings meant something. She padded to the kitchen barefoot, hair pulled back in a messy knot, the borrowed hoodie still hanging off her frame. Darius stood at the stove, spatula in one hand, a bowl of eggs in the other. Nia sat at the counter on a high stool, buttering toast with the serious focus of a scientist. "You cook?" Sloane asked before she could stop herself. Darius glanced at her without turning off the burner. "Only when I'm trying to impress the critics," he said, nodding at Nia, who gave a solemn thumbs up. "High standards," Sloane muttered, folding her arms with a wry smile. "Want to help?" he asked, sliding a cutting board toward her. Sloane hesitated. "I'm a hazard in the kitchen." "We live dangerously around here," he replied. So she picked up a knife and started chopping peppers, badly. Pieces flew in uneven chunks, some too big, some too thin. She frowned, but said nothing. Darius didn't correct her. He just scooped them up and tossed them into the skillet like they were perfect. That tiny gesture, treating her efforts like they mattered, hit her in a place she didn't expect. When it came time to flip the eggs, she tried again, determined. This time she sent half the pan's contents onto the counter. "Oops," Nia giggled. "Daddy does that too." Darius handed her a paper towel with a straight face. Occupational hazard. Sloane laughed for real then, an unguarded full sound that startled even her. She hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Certainly not in kitchens filled with marble and silence and staff who never spoke unless summoned. They finally sat down to eat. The eggs were slightly rubbery, the toast uneven, the bacon somehow too crispy and too chewy at the same time. But Darius ate every bite like it was a five-star meal, nodding solemnly with each forkful. "Don't patronize me," Sloane said, raising an eyebrow. "Who's patronizing?" he replied. "This is gourmet survival cuisine." Even Nia pretended to chew thoughtfully before whispering, "You tried your best." Sloane mock glared. "That's not a compliment." "It is around here," Darius said. And somehow it felt true. After breakfast, Darius moved to the sink with a quiet efficiency, rinsing plates without being asked. Sloane followed, trying to help, but he waved her off. "Relax, you earned the day off." "From what?" she asked. "From pretending you're not exhausted." That silenced her. She stood there, unsure of how to argue with that kind of kindness. Eventually, she returned to the living room where Nia was building a crooked tower of blocks. Sloane dropped to the floor beside her without thinking and asked, "Need an assistant?" "Only if you're good at roofs," Nia said seriously. "Most people mess those up." They built quietly for a while. Sloane's hands still ached from the cold, and her back still remembered nights on floors and benches. But her chest felt steady. Not healed, but anchored. Later, Darius stepped out for his shift, leaving behind a small note taped to the fridge. "Leftover pancakes in the oven. Nia knows the rules. Lock the door after dark." Sloane stared at the handwriting for a long time. There was nothing romantic or dramatic about it, but it was proof that someone had thought of her enough to leave breakfast behind. That, somehow, mattered more than diamonds ever had. By the end of her third night under Darius's roof, Sloane no longer counted the hours. The urge to flee had quieted, not gone, but softened, like an echo that no longer had the strength to reach her. Each day followed a rhythm she hadn't known she needed. Morning light through gauzy curtains. Nia's sleepy shuffle toward the couch for a cuddle before cartoons. The scent of coffee brewed too strong, and eggs cooked too long. And silence, the good kind, not the loaded kind that used to hang in the marble halls of her former life. Here, no one demanded anything. Not answers, not explanations, not a version of herself tailored to expectations. She began to do small things without being asked. Folded the blanket on the couch each morning. Rinsed her own plate after breakfast. Helped Nia pack her lunch even though she didn't know where anything was. Darius noticed, but never commented. There was no scoreboard in this house. Just unspoken agreements born of respect. At night, she found herself listening for the sound of his boots outside, waiting for that quiet sigh he let out when the door clicked shut behind him after work. She didn't ask about the job, or the hours, or how he managed to keep a home standing on a single income. She didn't need to. The evidence was in the soft-spoken steadiness of his hands and the way Nia lit up when he walked into a room. Darius, in turn, never asked about the necklace she kept tucked deep inside her duffel bag, wrapped in a faded gym sock. He never pried into the past, though the lines around his eyes said he understood the weight people carried. Sometimes she caught him watching her, not with suspicion, but with the quiet study of a man trying to understand someone without forcing them to speak. It was the kind of observation that wasn't invasive. It felt like being seen without being exposed. The laundromat came as an accident. Darius mentioned it in passing, an offhand comment about a friend who needed help folding sheets and running a few loads for a local hotel. Sloane had hesitated, but something in her gut told her it was time. Time to earn something, no matter how small. The work was tedious and relentless, soap stinging her fingers, heat from dryers clinging to her skin, the occasional rude customer barking orders like she was invisible. But when the day ended, her body ached in a way that felt real, honest. She hadn't earned much, but she'd earned it. Back at the house that evening, she'd barely kicked off her shoes when Darius slid a clean pair of white sneakers toward her. No brand, no box, just a folded note inside one of them. "If you're going to walk through fire, You should have decent souls." She didn't say thank you, didn't need to. The next morning she laced them up and walked back into the laundromat before it even opened, ready to scrub towels and sort uniforms, not because she had to, but because she chose to. That alone felt like power. As the days passed, routines formed. Nia would chatter about school while Sloane folded pillowcases with aching wrists. On weekends, they'd split shifts. Darius at night, Sloane during the day. Meals became simpler but more shared. Laughter, though rare, began to return in cautious bursts. They didn't talk about forever. They didn't talk about the past. They just kept moving forward, one small act at a time, building something invisible but strong. And for the first time in her life, Sloane began to understand the strange, quiet dignity of survival. The kind that doesn't scream or demand recognition, but simply shows up. Day after day, in folded laundry, in shared silence, in worn-out shoes and late-night tea left on a counter without a word. The kind of love that didn't need a label to matter. It happened without warning, less a moment than a crack, thin and sharp, slicing through the steady rhythm they'd built. One careless fold of a laundry bundle, one careless slip of fabric, and suddenly a delicate gold chain spilled out onto the counter, catching the fluorescent light like it had a story to tell. Sloane froze. The necklace lay atop a pile of bleached towels, its sapphire pendant glowing with the kind of luxury that didn't belong in a place where bleach burned through skin and uniforms smelled like exhaustion. She reached for it instinctively, fingers trembling, but she wasn't fast enough. Darius had already seen. He didn't speak. Just looked at her, first at the necklace, then at her, and something shifted in his eyes. Not suspicion, not even anger, just disappointment, quiet and heavy. For a second, neither of them moved. Time held its breath. Then Sloane tucked the necklace away with shaking hands, offering no explanation. She wanted to lie. Say it was a gift, a forgotten keepsake, anything. But Darius didn't ask. Instead, he simply wiped his hands on a towel and turned back to the counter, shoulders rigid. The silence between them stretched wide and brittle. Later that evening, when they walked home side by side, the space between their bodies felt longer than the city blocks they crossed. Nia's hand in Sloane's didn't bridge the distance. When they got home, Darius went straight to the back room without a word. The door clicked softly behind him, but it sounded louder than a slammed one. That night, Sloane couldn't sleep. The necklace sat on the table beside her, daring her to explain it, to own it. Her thoughts circled uselessly, what she should say, what she couldn't. When morning came, the words were still stuck in her throat. She tried to act normal, made pancakes, laughed too hard at Nia's knock-knock joke. But Darius wasn't fooled. He moved around the house like a man half present, polite but distant. Not cold, just removed. And somehow, that hurt more than fury ever could. The unraveling wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. A pause in the hallway, averted eyes over dinner, conversations reduced to logistics. She caught him looking at her sometimes, like he was trying to reconcile the girl he'd taken in with the one who hid luxury in her laundry. But the hardest part was that he didn't accuse her, didn't demand answers, just let the silence widen until even kindness felt like a performance. Sloane had always known how to survive confrontation. But quiet disappointment? That cut deeper than anything. The tension finally cracked when the stranger walked into the laundromat, a man with a smirk too familiar, a camera phone held like a weapon, and a voice that made her stomach drop. "There she is," he muttered, raising his phone without shame. "Daddy's been looking for you, sweetheart." The words weren't a threat, but they may as well have been. The air thickened. Sloane backed away instinctively, panic blooming. Darius reacted first, moved fast, stepped between them without hesitation, voice low and firm. "You need to leave, now." But the man just laughed and took another photo. They left everything behind: sheets, machines, even Darius's paycheck on the counter. Back through the alley, into the truck, Naya picked up from school mid-nap and whisked into a neighbor's arms before she could ask too many questions. Mrs. Sanchez didn't blink, just nodded and took Nia inside like it was already planned. Then Darius and Sloane were gone, engine rumbling beneath them, city lights smearing past the windows as they drove with no map, no plan. In the quiet of the cab, Sloane stared at the bruise forming on his arm. "He shoved you," she whispered. He didn't answer. At a red light, she finally broke. "You didn't have to get involved. I should have handled it." He looked at her then, not with blame, but with something deeper. "I couldn't not," he said simply. "That's not how I'm wired." She turned away, ashamed, knowing he'd risked more than a bruise. Knowing she hadn't told him enough. Maybe hadn't told him anything that mattered. The truck rolled forward again, headlights carving a path through the dark. For a moment, she thought he might pull over, tell her to get out. Instead, he just kept driving, kept protecting her, even if she didn't deserve it. And that was the fracture, not the necklace, not the man with the camera, but the weight of what hadn't been said, the cost of the silence she'd clung to for too long. The silence inside the truck after that night was different, not tense, not cold, just full, thick with everything they both now knew but hadn't yet unpacked. They returned to the house just after dusk, parking a block away, headlights off, scanning the street with a quiet wariness neither of them questioned. But something felt off even before they saw the car. A black town car idled in front of the driveway, polished like a threat under the lamplight. Two men stood on either side of the porch, suits stiff, eyes sharp. Darius reached for Sloane's arm instinctively, guiding her behind him. But she was already stepping forward. She knew who was waiting. Her father emerged from the house like a shadow stepping into form, impeccably dressed, silver hair combed back with the precision of a man who'd never allowed chaos into his life. His gaze swept over the modest home, the neighborhood, the peeling paint on the porch railing, with a kind of disgust that didn't need words. "Emma," he said, voice cold and exact, "get in the car." Darius stiffened beside her, but didn't move. "You her father?" he asked. "I'm Winston Langford," the man replied flatly, "and you've been harboring my daughter." "I gave her a couch," Darius answered, voice steady. "That's not a crime." Winston's eyes narrowed. "This place? This life? It's beneath her." The words dropped like acid. "You think she belongs here?" Darius didn't flinch. "She gets to decide where she belongs." Sloane stepped between them then. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. "Stop," she said. "You've said your piece." Winston gestured again. "Now come home." She stared at the car, the one she'd spent years being driven around in like cargo. It wasn't a ride. It was a cage. "This is home," she whispered. "No," he shot back. "This is where you ran to, not where you belong." Darius turned to her. "You don't have to go." But Sloane had already seen the ending play out in her father's eyes. The pressure wasn't verbal. It never was. It was the weight of legacy, of expectations, of an empire she'd never wanted, but could never seem to escape. "I think I do," she said softly. "No one's forcing you," Darius said. "Yes, they are," she answered. "Just not with chains." She took a single step back. He didn't follow. Her fingers curled at her sides, fighting against the shaking, against the scream building in her throat. But when the door closed behind her and the car pulled away, she didn't look back. Back inside the house, Darius stood on the porch for a long time. He didn't speak, didn't slam the door. He just turned off the porch light and let the dark settle around him like a second skin. Inside, the silence was unbearable. Her jacket still hung over the chair. Nia's crayon drawing remained on the fridge. And just like that, she was gone. No fight, no goodbye. Just a choice made under pressure. He couldn't make it for her. Days passed in a blur. Darius moved like a ghost. Nia asked fewer questions, but started sleeping with the lights on. Then came the fever. By the time he realized how bad it was, she was already burning in his arms on the way to the hospital. The nurse asked for a $6,000 deposit he didn't have. He was still pleading when a voice cut through. "I've got it." Emma. Rain-soaked, calm. She handed over her card. No questions, no drama, just action. Later, as Nia slept under a monitor's soft beeping, Darius and Emma sat in silence. He didn't ask why she came back. She didn't offer an answer. Some things didn't need to be said. Emma stood in the marble hallway of her father's penthouse, high above the city she no longer felt a part of. The skyline glittered beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, sterile and stunning. Winston sat at the edge of a long glass table, reading the markets like they were scripture, never once looking up. "I figured you'd come back once the fantasy ended," he said. But the fantasy wasn't the life she'd built with Darius. It was this. A palace with no warmth. A man who believed love could be measured in dollars. Emma didn't flinch. "I didn't come back," she said. "I came to say goodbye." She didn't yell. She didn't beg for approval. She just told the truth. She talked about the man who showed up every day without fanfare. The little girl who taught her how to laugh again. The pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. The way a tiny house could hold more love than a mansion ever could. And when her father asked if she loved him, her answer was simple. "I do." Not with condition. Not with apology. Just truth. "You think that's enough?" he asked. "It's everything," she replied. And then she left, not running, walking. The knock came at sunrise. Darius was still wearing his old hoodie, flipping pancakes for Nia, pretending he wasn't waiting for anything. When he opened the door, she was standing there, damp from the morning mist, a brown paper bag in hand. "Blueberry muffins," she said. "For Nia, real ones, no preservatives." He didn't speak. Not at first. She stepped closer. "I'm not here to spend the night," she added. "I'm here to stay, if you'll have me." He searched her face for doubt, but there was none. "We're not rich," he said. "I've had everything," she replied. "I just never had a home that loved me back." And then Nia peeked around the corner, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Are you staying forever?" she asked, voice small. Emma dropped to one knee and pulled her close. "Yeah, kiddo," she said through a smile and tears. "Forever sounds good." 2 months later, the old pickup truck was parked in the city park every Saturday morning. Darius's Diner was scribbled in bold letters across a hand-painted sign. Emma worked the griddle, Darius took orders, and Nia handed out napkins and smiles like they were currency. They didn't make a fortune, but they made enough. Enough to eat. Enough to breathe. Enough to build something real. Darius caught Emma watching him one morning, sunlight bouncing off her curls as she flipped pancakes. She grinned, and he mouthed the words he couldn't always say aloud. "Thank you." And she smiled back, because no empire in the world could buy what they had built from scratch, with kindness, struggle, and the kind of love that stays even when it hurts. This fictional story hit me hard. It's about how the smallest acts, offering a couch, boiling water for tea, listening without judgment, can completely change a life. We all need connection. But more than that, we need someone who sees us not for what we have or where we come from, but for who we choose to become. And that's priceless. If you've made it this far, tell us in the comments, which scene hit you the hardest? Leave a like if you believe that small acts of kindness can change lives. And don't forget to subscribe. More real stories are coming, ones that will stay with you long after the screen fades to black.